Advanced Psychoproctology for Beginners, Ahole Diagnosis, Treatment, and Prevention with Dr. Jeremy Sherman. Welcome to Class 10 of our Advanced Psychoproctology course for beginners. Today we'll finish this large first part of the course on how to diagnose aholes more objectively. We'll also find a more descriptive name than ahole or any clinical alternative like narcissist or psychopath. And then we'll deal with the practical challenges of diagnosing aholes. I'll start, though, by highlighting some takeaways from past classes that will help us home in on what makes an ahole an ahole. In doing so, I'll get a little deep and wide with a quick tour of the grand scheme of things from my best guess scientific perspective. For what it's worth, take what you will from it. I started this course with the intuition that aholes demand the last word. In Chapter 4, I confessed to having smuggled in that assumption. I argued that a more rigorous approach to diagnosis would explain how a category like ahole emerges from what precedes it. In Class 5, I attempted a natural history of the emergence of aholes, moving step by step from non-living matter to organisms to animals to humans to aholes. Unlike non-living matter, organisms struggle for their own existence, trying to prevent their own degeneration. Life is not some special added supernatural thingy or vital energy that visits inanimate matter and then moves on elsewhere. Rather, it's a way that matter and energy can limit what happens, the way that chemical processes can prevent each other from ending. I know that sounds odd and maybe esoteric, so let me illustrate how that happens. Picture yourself walking through an empty airport terminal. Taking the shortest path, you walk in a straight line because no one's in your way. Contrast that with walking through the terminal when it's congested with people threading around each other from all directions. The straight path that was your likely path of least resistance becomes unlikely. Congested, too slow to try through all those people. In the congestion, some windy path becomes your path of least resistance. Congestion happens in material, energetic stuff, but isn't itself a material or energetic thing, and yet it alters what's likely to occur. Looking down on the whole crowd from a terminal balcony, you'd see patterns of congestion and flow. Such patterns emerging in congestion are how scientists explain whirlpools and other self-organizing dynamics. A whirlpool's spiral path is the path of least resistance when water gets turbulent, in other words, energetically and materially congested. A whirlpool is like a naturally occurring roundabout. Civil engineers will tell you that roundabouts are the smoothest way to keep cars flowing through intersections. A whirlpool is not some thingy added or imposed on water. It's a way that, in interaction, lots of material bits and energetic gusts can change what's likely to happen. You know that two billiard balls bumping into each other can change each other's directions. Well, it turns out there are population effects like that. For example, a whole population of water or air molecules becoming currents that change each other's directions, yielding these patterns of congestion and flow. These patterns are natural, though not material or energetic things or forces, nor are they supernatural, and yet they change what's likely to happen. Since these patterns of congestion and flow aren't things, when they disappear, there's nothing left of them. Turn off the water or remove the source of congestion, for example, a rock in a stream, and the whirlpool vanishes. It becomes non-existent. Where today is the first whirlpool you saw in your childhood? You might remember it, but the whirlpool itself is nowhere because patterns of congestion and flow, though natural, are not things. The whirlpool was a change in what's likely. It appeared and disappeared. A whirlpool isn't struggling to persist, but we living beings are. For thousands of years, we've looked for the natural or supernatural thing or force that makes us come alive. That's kind of weird when you stop to think about it. We know that whenever some things happen, other things don't. They were prevented from happening. We know that willpower isn't a different kind of energy or matter, but rather us focusing our breakfast energy, channeling it into our priorities. Still, somehow, for all these millennia, and until recently, we didn't consider the possibility that our very lives aren't something added to matter or energy, but a constraint on what happens. A self-limitation, a prevention that keeps decay at bay, a change in likeliness resulting from congestion and flow, including congestion solidifying into body parts like bones and teeth. Now, a whirlpool isn't trying to prevent itself from degenerating. It's a pattern of congestion and flow that channels energy and matter into a spiral. In contrast, we living beings are patterns of congestion and flow that channel energy into work to prevent the degeneration of that pattern of congestion and flow. My selfhood is not so much a structure as it is a stricture, a limitation on what happens, that at my death ceases to limit what happens. I'm not some material or energetic soul thingy added to matter and energy that lives on. My soul is rather the way that matter and energy move through me, such that I limit the likeliness of me degenerating. And without my self-degeneration, what's left is my healing and sealing, self-repair and self-protection. I consume and dispose of matter and energy all day. I'm not really made of stuff. I'm made through it, a little like the congestion at the airport or in a whirlpool, though they're doing nothing to regenerate themselves. My soul, my core trying, effort, and striving is neither magic nor a machine. Rather, it's like me focusing on my work, preventing myself from dithering so I can keep on keeping on. I am a prevention. Everything I do accords with the laws of physics. No magic. But I'm a chemical system that keeps itself within tighter limits than those imposed by physics. And at death, those tighter limits are gone, freeing the matter and energy that happen to be passing through my congestions and flows to do whatever forevermore. Once there were these degeneration-preventing, self-regenerative systems, evolution by natural selection could prune the variations to where today we have this vast array of responsive organisms proactively and selectively interacting with their circumstances, doing all sorts of fancy footwork to prevent their own deaths, like I do. At least preventing my own death is what I try to do. I'm fussy about it. It's an obsession for me, keeping myself alive and well as long as I can, given my ever-changing circumstances. It's iffy, risky effort, trial and error, no guarantees, guesswork. All organisms are at risk like that, but it only really freaks us humans out, because with language, we're the only creatures that can contemplate everything and us appearing and disappearing within it. Dying doesn't bother even the oldest, hardiest tree. It's not shrieking in horror when it's cut down. Dying bothers animals. They howl in pain, but not in horrified conceptual contemplation of all that they're losing. Things are different for us humans, and language is the reason. With language, we know our at-riskness in ways no other earthly creature can. We struggle to stay alive knowing we will die, surmising that when we die, we won't exist any more than yesterday's whirlpool. All life long, when we leave one place, we show up in another place, ever present to ourselves, even as the scenery changes. At death, it's not like that. We leave here for nowhere. That's viscerally inconceivable to us, yet through language, it's a concept that shadows us wherever we go. Here we are, each of us trying so hard to keep on keeping on, yet aware that we can't keep this up forever. Death is humanity's biggest elephant in the room. We humans can foresee our own death and are reminded of it every time we fumble. Every little failure can feel like a little death. Every little death a lingering foreboding of what's to come. Every stumble exposes us to our vulnerability. Given language, we're an anxious species, doing our best to keep from feeling anxious. Humans have not escaped the iffy effort of staying alive, though with language we have evolved the capacity to pretend that we have. We can pretend we found some can't-fail formula for living and even for eternal life. Through language, we're overwhelmed by possibilities, all the threats and opportunities, including the threat of missed opportunities. With language, we gain the tremendous anxious power of if-onlys, by which we can imagine and create, but also imagine and regret. The iffy anxiousness of our guesswork can be intense, though you might not notice because you've been steeped in self-aware uncertainty all life long. Or you may have thought the anxiety was just you. For reducing anxiety, language also comes to our rescue. It affords us ways to fantasize our way out of reality and all the anxieties that come with it. We can close our eyes, embracing self-motivating myths that drown out our uncertainties. We can say what we need to hear, giving ourselves the false impression that we're absolutely safe and free on some strata above and protected from reality. With language, we can spin our interpretations to suit our emotional biases, spinning up with big words the possibilities that make us feel safe, and spinning down with trivializing words the possibilities that threaten. To name it is to tame it cuts both ways. By naming possibilities, we make them salient, so we can be on the lookout for them. Or we can tame them until we're no longer threatened by them. Nuclear Armageddon has as many syllables as vanilla ice cream sundae. Language is a flexible leveler. With it, we can turn up and down the salience of possibilities to suit our emotional biases. We can engage in threat displacement. For example, instead of worrying about real-world threats like the climate crisis, we can make a melodramatic big deal out of worrying whether God will let us into heaven, his eternal Disneyland, if we allow transsexuals to use the wrong bathroom. In short, language stirs our anxious demand for liberation from reality's guesswork, and it supplies a way to meet that demand, albeit falsely, because there is no escaping reality. There's only pretending that we have, as a-holes do. Language explains the a-hole option and why we'd want it. To get a sense of how language makes aholery possible, consider this analogy. Air pilots can earn an instrument license, which permits them to fly in low or no visibility conditions, or, as it's called, flying by instrument, flying by monitoring nothing outside the cockpit, just the plane's instrument panel. Pilots are rightly obsessed with keeping their instruments well calibrated to their reality outside the plane. They don't want to fly in the dark with their altimeters giving them incorrect readings on their altitude. That would be deadly. With feeling-fueled language, we gain something like an internal instrument panel, our self-talk, our feeling-fueled words of self-affirmation. We can thus become like pilots, but deliberately miscalibrating our altimeters because we want to feel high, regardless of whether we are. We want to make realistic decisions, but flying by instrument, we gauge our decisions by how we feel about them. Through proud, uplifting pep talks, we can elevate our altimeter readings. We can voice our decisions with absolute self-assertion and bravado, as if we're the brave ones, when really we're just trying to shoo that elephant away, to make of ourselves exceptions to the chanciness of life and the inevitable fate of all living beings. Feeling optimistic and high should be a reward for careful, thoughtful guesswork, but it can also be a substitute for it. Just make impulsive decisions with pride, and you'll feel like you're a high-flying decision maker even when you're nosediving. Feeling confident in our decisions is easier than making careful ones. In Class 6, we explored spin dominance, the way we can untether words from what they mean, ignoring their denotations, thereby miscalibrating them to reality. When we untether words from what they mean, they're free to serve our feelings, and chiefly our desire to feel safe and free from anxiety. Untethering words from their denotations or meanings, they can be used to give us an upbeat, self-elevating last word. In Class 7, we explored frame dominance, the way we can use words to claim the last words on us getting the last word. Frame dominance is like using all your gains in power to rig things so you can gain still more power, the power to decide who gets the power. Together, spin and frame dominance can give us the impression that we can do no wrong and can do anything we like. In Classes 8 and 9, we explored some routes to these imaginary states of absolutely liberated safety and freedom, some of the many possible detours one can take to arrive in aholia as part of a cult or as a lone a-hole. What all citizens of aholia have in common is what I'll call the wild card, trump card formula, or WTF. It's like having a bottomless deck of cards that free you to do anything you want, that's the wild card, and to feel triumphant, that's the trump card, no matter what you do. The wild card is what you get with spin dominance. You untether yourself from the meaning or denotation of words and are thereby free to spin your every impulse in the most self-reaffirming way. With a wild card, you can do anything. You're absolutely free. Just ignore what words mean. Attend only to whether they sound positive or negative. If they sound negative, they're about your rivals. If they sound positive, they're about you. The wild card is spin dominance, and it's easy. Remember, a computer douchebot could be programmed to do just that. Type in the word patriot, the computer finds it on a lookup table labeled as having positive connotations, and so it spits out, I am a patriot. Type in the word traitor, the computer finds it on a lookup table labeled as having negative connotations, and so spits out, you are a traitor. The douchebot doesn't know or care what these words mean, and still it could be programmed to spit them out with unflinching, charismatic self-certainty. Donald Trump's internal programming is more sophisticated than that, though barely. And then there's the trump card. That's what you get with frame dominance. Since you're the last word on who gets the last word, you can always insist that your spin wins the first place trophy. You can play the supreme judge, adjudicating your own case and always deciding in your favor. For frame dominance, just memorize the moves listed in Class 7 and employ them mindlessly, no regard for their appropriate application. A douchebot could be programmed to do that too. Trump certainly is. We would do well to appreciate how valuable the WTF would be for any of us. It would be like having all the best shields and weapons, fortresses and artillery, the ultimate defense and offense. The WTF puts you securely atop the safest plateau, free to exercise your will without any real-world constraints imposed, no obligations or duties, nothing holding you back or limiting your impulses. Imagine that a wizard gave you a magic wand. Just wave it and all discouraging possibilities vanish. Wave it again and you automatically win every competition. That's what a-holes feel like they've found. Their magic wand makes them feel absolutely safe, no discouraging news, and absolutely free. They win all competitions, no matter what they do. Of course, that's not what they say they've found. They say they have the righteous truth or are from the sect that knows. We all reach for that wand from time to time, in a pinch when we can get away with it. A-holes wave it unconstrainedly. The wild card, trump card formula is absolutely protected high horse anarchy, like the dream sold in any off-road vehicle advertisement. With the WTF, you feel like you can escape the constraints of the congested roadway and run away from it all. A dream, all expense paid, eternal vacation, the ultimate liberation. It's like heaven, except for the false sense that in heaven, you would only want to behave righteously. As though freed from constraints, you wouldn't just become a reckless wildcard party animal. The psychologist Ernest Becker described humans as gods with anuses, by which he meant that with the power of language, we can imagine the infinite. As such, we're like gods, but like all other organisms, we're tethered, grounded in reality still, after all these eons, running stuff through our finite selves, struggling to keep food on the table and needing to go to the toilet. We can dream of flying to infinity and beyond, but fear falling, stuck with humiliating guesswork in an iffy reality that could end us any time. Being an a-hole is playing God, like trying to forget that you're tethered to reality. Language exposes us to the infinite possibilities and the terrifying certainty of death, but it also frees us to imagine the on-ramp to off-road liberation from the doubts imposed by all those possibilities and by the inevitable doom of our own deaths. With language, we can imagine infinite satisfaction, but also the infinite void into which we vaporize at death. Humans are burdened with a question that burdens no other earthly organism. How to throw our all into life, knowing that we'll be thrown out. How to invest in our lives, knowing that at death, we will be forced to divest of everything, including what's most viscerally precious to us, our own selfhood. How then to care and strive, knowing that we will amount to nothing. Historically, there have been two primary responses that shrug off the burden of these questions. One suggests that you just have to invest in the eternal one true way, engaging in what Becker called an immortality project. For example, commit to some sacred text, which isn't just the eternal truth, but also how you will become eternal, residing safe and free in heaven forever as reward for your commitment. Or just dig in your heels as an a-hole without a cause, because your gut impulses are always right everywhere and every when. The other answer suggests that investing is a mistake. Just divest of everything. Become absolutely detached. Commit to non-commitment. Buddhism and ascetic practices have this flavor. Postmodernism and scientific materialism do too, which try to explain away selves as merely chemical computers. At the extremes, such divestment campaigns become fatalism and cynicism. The world means nothing. You mean nothing. Your selfhood isn't real. Convince yourself that you're not a self. Choose determinism. Nothing matters. Reality is a figment, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And told to nothing, because you're just a figment. The view of life presented in this course suggests that neither of those extremes is right. You don't matter for all eternity, but you do matter. You matter to yourself and to the creatures you help and influence. You are a real self, really struggling for betterment. Things matter to you even if they don't matter to the universe or some imaginary parental figure in the sky. You'll spend your life trying to figure out what should and shouldn't matter to you, where you should invest and divest. That's your fallible selective interaction, you trying to interact with the right things, not the wrong things. If you can admit to your fallibility, with time you'll get better at guessing. That's all. A life well spent in life's trial and error process. No prizes in the afterlife, not even for the powerful, holy, rich, or famous. You can't take it with you because there will be no you. But you can take it while here. Take the trial and error curriculum of the School of Hard Knocks and make it possible for others to do the same. Whatever floats your boat, as long as you don't make the waters too choppy for others. Make your life meaningful, but not in ways that make other people's lives impossible. The iffy fallibilism of life is what an a-hole avoids by relaxing into incoherence. An a-hole manages to combine the two extreme answers. They're on an existential immortality crusade of universal importance, that's their trump card, and they can do whatever they want because nothing matters, that's their wild card. Again, you hear that pairing in the way a-holes toggle effortlessly between prude and brat, at once pretending to be the all-trumping authorities on the one true way, and then toggling to cynical, fatalistic anarchy. No deed too dirty for saints like them. That's what the wild card trump card formula affords to the a-hole fake holy warriors who employ it. Absolute high horse safety and low life freedom. WTF is also the non-a-hole's natural response to an a-hole armed with the wild card trump card formula. WTF is going on with this person? Are they dumb or evil? The audacity, stupidity, arrogance, hypocrisy. How can they believe the BS they spout? Do they know it's BS? Are they saying it just to get their way? Are they dumb or dumb like a fox? We can find the answer to these WTF questions in the formula itself. Yes, when toggled to their godlike authority, a-holes do believe their BS passionately. If by believe we mean they feel full, visceral, raging commitment to it. They believe it like a belligerent ape believes it should be the alpha male. But no, they don't believe it because it's just them bullshit dozing their way through the competition. Saint or cynic, whatever works. They're Joan of Arc and Al Capone. Anything to bullshit doze their way through. To ask whether a-holes believe their bullshit is like asking whether an ape believes that he deserves to be the king of the hill. Wrong question. A-holes are language braying super predators. Our WTF response is an added key to the WTF's power. A-holes keep us guessing. Decent people are flummoxed, confused, disoriented, and frustrated by an a-hole's audacity. To the a-hole, our confusion is further proof of their godlike status. With their wild card mobility and trump card authority, they dance circles around us. Tangled up in their bullshit dozing, we feel outsmarted, as if by a 3D chess master, not a norm-defying bullshit dozer. As mentioned in the last class, the heartless heart of a-holery may be nothing more than that a-holes prefer doing what they prefer doing, unfettered by reality, and have found a way to get away with it. They've landed on the WTF, and it works reliably enough that they're on automatic, just robotically playing cards from their bottomless deck of wild cards and trump cards. It's just a habit, likely not even much of a thrill anymore. They're addicted to it, jaded like a heavy smoker who no longer gets the buzz. But still, they can't do without the WTF. They feel like they'd be nothing without it. I suspect a-holes feel as okay as anyone. In psychology, we talk about the happiness treadmill, the way that increases in fortune become the new normal rather than some big uptick in happiness. The same could be said for an a-hole's attempts at superiority. It's a superiority treadmill. A-holes may not get any joy from trumping others, but they're dependent for their okayness on their capacity to always remain the ones who dominate, controlling both the spin and frame of any interaction they enter. Money, power, sex, flattery, I suspect that's all just a means to their end of maintaining a steady diet of evidence that they have spin and frame dominance. They get to define reality. How often do you think about the roof over your head? Probably not much. How heroic do you feel every day for driving safely to work? Probably not very. Maybe you were excited when you first paid for your own roof or drove safely, but with time, a habit's excitement fades. If something is working fine, you can ignore it. And you will, because you've got other things to do than sit around celebrating what's reliable or wondering whether something that always works is working. Perhaps then the resting state of an a-hole isn't even self-aware at all. That would explain why when you enter conflict with an a-hole, it feels like nobody's home. You swipe at them and never make contact, like swiping at thin air. Though they appear swell-headed, they're practically headless. An a-hole is a mindless, heartless robot for some supposedly higher cause, even if that higher cause only comes down to the robot getting to bullshit doze everything in its path. A-holes stumbled on that can't-fail bag of rhetorical wild cards and trump cards, though that's redundant, since to trump means to beat, as in trump card, but it also means to fake, as in trumped up. A wild card is a trumped-up card. Donald Trump is addicted to the robotic habit of playing trumped-up trump cards. Charles Dickens couldn't have picked a better surname for Trump. A-holes are trump bots. That's the term I propose here to replace a-hole. Trump bot with a lowercase t. Trump bots robotically play trumped-up trump cards. We can bet that when reality chews and spits out Donald Trump, his name will become a diagnostic term. That has happened to past a-holes, for example, Napoleon complex, Stalinesque, or Hitleresque. Still, we're trying to generalize across all a-holes, and with the Donalds so fresh in our minds, people might fail to generalize. People often fail to generalize carefully from a negative role model like Trump. For example, assuming that all a-holes brand themselves to the same supposed cause, so that anyone who is like Stalin has to be a communist, anyone who acts like Hitler has to be an anti-Semite, or anyone acting like Trump has to pander to the right-wing conspiracy theorists. That's one of the main ways we fail to learn the lessons of history. The equivalent to thinking that the lesson is don't elect short people with mustaches because Hitler and Stalin were mustachioed shorties. Wrong lesson. Generalizing carefully is not the same as generalizing narrowly. Indeed, generalizing recklessly often involves not generalizing broadly enough. Here I'm proposing a careful, precise, and yet broad generalization. Anyone who relies absolutely on the trumped-up trumping wildcard trump card formula is a Trump bot, broad yet precise. If we survive Trump, he will have been the best psychoproctology course in national, if not human, history. The quintessential troll model, essence of a-hole, but only if we generalize carefully yet broadly from his nature. It would be a wasted history lesson if people assumed a Trump bot had to believe in building the wall and having Mexico pay for it, or whatever else the president bullshit dozed. Trump botting isn't about what one believes. That's the last thing it's about. Trump bots don't have beliefs, even though they bullshit dose and pander as though their beliefs trump all other considerations. It's not about what they believe, but how they strut it. One can be a Trump bot for any cause or no cause. One could be a woke leftist, love is the answer, atheist, hippie, Buddhist Trump bot. So maybe it's too soon to rename a-holes Trump bots, what with Trump so fresh in our nightmares. We could also call a-holes God bots since they play God robotically. We could also call them gloat bots since they're robotically addicted to gloating. Or crow bots since they're robotically addicted to crowing. We could call them bullshit dozers or WTFers, though that's cryptic. They're addicts, so we could call them gloataholics or assaholics. We could call them demeaners too, demeaning everyone by not caring about word meanings. Lots of options. We've always had lots of options. A thesaurus entry just of names people call a-holes would take up a small volume. Still, most names for a-holes express our frustration with them more than they do what's really going on with a-holes. Even the term narcissist is an inaccurate diagnosis. It suggests that Trump bots are self-infatuated, which yes, is the impression they give, but no, probably isn't what it's like to be a Trump bot. They're more likely just folks who found an easy detour to aholia, any old path of least resistance, and got away with plowing mindlessly through until it became a habit, just braying what to them are merely functional, get-out-of-my-way sounds. Functional because we mistake those sounds for words with meanings, as they would be if spoken by non-Trump bot. We need not find the one right and official term. Still, I need one working term that is more descriptively and neutrally accurate than any of the vulgar terms like asshole, or any of the clinical terms casually wielded like narcissist or psychopath. Trumpbot has the advantage of being convertible to a verb, trumpbotting, or an adjective, trumbotic. So we'll go with that for the rest of this course, so long as you promise to remember it's not just Trump or Trumpies, a point I've made so many times by now it should be clear. I hereby plug Trumpbot into a hole we've kept open until now. Trumpbot means a-hole. And to review, what distinguishes everyone's occasional trumpbotting from an absolute trumpbot can be found in the original quote. It's not power corrupts, it's power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. In other words, trumpbotting tends to corrupt. It's the absolute trumpbotting that corrupts absolutely. Absolutism is isolation from all reality checks, utter immunity to feedback from reality, much like God is imagined to be, perfectly unconstrained. Though with God it's ambiguous. He's under the sway of nothing, but he responds to your prayers. Confusing. But there's something like that going on with Trump bots too. They play God. You can petition them from your position of powerlessness, but you can't manipulate them. They call the shots because they have the view from nowhere, absolutely isolated. The WTF is the ultimate mindless head rush for Trump bots, but it's doomed. A mad, uncalibrated, flying by instrument nosedive into bedrock natural reality. One can't stay absolutely reality-proofed and survive for long, any more than one can go without air, food, or water. We all need our selective interaction because we all need interaction with the world outside ourselves. If we didn't need anything from reality, we could be absolutely isolated, but that's not us. We're islands of individuality maintained by selectively importing and exporting in interaction with the world outside us. Science is about facing reality as squarely as possible. Trump bots aren't just anti-this or that inconvenient scientific finding. They are sweepingly opposed to scientific checks on their confirmation bias. They aren't just maladapted to reality. They're anti-adaptation and anti-reality. Being a Trump bot is a more dangerous addiction than heroin. Heroin users might kill themselves. They can cause serious harm to others, but they're drug-addled and impotent because of it. They're not going to form cults. Hermann Goering was a Nazi Trump bot in charge of Hitler's military operations. He was also a heroin addict toward the end of his reign of power. Heroin lost him power. Becoming a Trump bot is like getting addicted to nearsightedness, blind to everything going on outside the shell of one's own confirmation bias pep talks. Call it myopium, a pain-killing opium-like addiction to myopia or short-sightedness, absolutely local and in the moment. The only standard is feeling like a winner here and now. Nothing else matters. It's not just playing God for others. It's a robotic devotion to oneself as God. It's reciting the first commandment in the first person. I am God. I shall have no other gods before me. Contrast that with science, which in effect says there is no higher power than natural reality. I shall have no other gods before it. Okay, so how can you tell whether you're dealing with a Trump bot? First, you can't ever tell for absolute certain. We never get that last word on whether someone is a Trump bot. There's no escaping this variation on the serenity prayer. Grant me the receptivity to engage with non-Trump bots, the fierce unreceptivity to be ruthless with Trump bots, and the wisdom to keep noticing the differences. Still, noticing the differences, you'll seek ever better discernment, ever better clues to help you decide whether you're dealing with a Trump bot. You'll want that discernment because it prevents two kinds of errors, remaining gullibly receptive to Trump bots and being unduly unreceptive with non-Trump bots. For all our efforts here, you will still misread people, and worse, Trump bots will want you to misread them. That's their frame dominance and gaslighting. They'll be the first to dismiss you as misreading them, and they'll do their best to convince you that you are. They'll prey on your guilt about guessing wrong, even if you're guessing right. Still, you may not need a formal test. The intuitions you've gleaned in this class should bring some rigor to your intuitions about when you are and aren't dealing with a Trump bot. Again, before this course, you probably hadn't given much thought, if any, to how to distinguish Trump bots as objectively as possible. That lack of exploration made you an easy mark for Trump bot doubt-mongering. You'd call someone a butthead and they'd just say that you're biased, that you just call everyone you buttheads with a butthead. You'd think they're wrong, but you wouldn't be able to say why. With the exploration we've been through here, you've got a leg to stand on in diagnosing Trump bots. So long as you keep wondering, questing for the wisdom to notice the differences between Trump bots and non-Trump bots, you'll probably make better bets about whether someone is a Trump bot. What's advanced about this advanced course in psychoproctology can't be my pronouncements or even the amount of effort we put into distinguishing Trump bots. Rather, it's the question itself. So long as you remain curious in your attempts to keep gleaning the wisdom to know the difference, you're an advanced psychoproctologist, at least in my book. Especially in contrast to the majority of people who simply assume that a Trump bot butthead is just anyone they butt heads with. By now, that should feel pretty novice to you. Still, let's explore some possible formal tests. One test would be getting nothing but dismissal, discounting, and refutations from someone. You raise 1,000 challenges and they dismiss them all. That's the know-it-all test, a Trump bot tell. Nothing changes a Trump bot's mind about anything ever. Not that they are of one mind. Trump bots are consistent only in their insistence. They'll hop from trump card to trump card, reeking of hypocrisy, but forever incorrigibly. There's just no talking to them. Still, notice that one could pose 1,000 challenges to your assumptions that wouldn't budge you in the least. People are made of chicken wire. You're not buying that. The earth is flat. You're not buying that either. Carrots are more fattening than pizza. No. Challenge after challenge, and you're not budging. You're a receptive person, not that it shows in those first 1,000 challenges. That means you could get 1,000 refutations from someone and still not have proof that they're a Trump bot. Maybe they would show some receptivity to your 1,001st challenge. Still, maybe being a Trump bot depends on how they dismiss their challenges. If someone challenged you on carrots being less fattening than pizzas, you'd have something substantive to say about why it's not true. Something about pizza and carrot. Trump bots sometimes memorize and parrot a few substantive arguments that rationalize their spin. They'll usually try to steer debates back to those memorized talking points. But they don't tend to notice the difference between a tailored reason and a generic rhetorical rationalization. They're perfectly happy to be literally unreasonable, without reasons other than that they said so, dressed up in generic rhetoric like those moves listed in Chapter 7. Their arguments tend to be very circular, closed loops made as tight as possible, reduced to little more than because. Here's another tell. Trump bots are to reasons as eggs are to sperm. Only one need apply. Once they've got a reason that affirms them, they close shop. The competition's over. Your reasons are wrong, inadmissible, and irrelevant because they've already got a reason. If you give them alternative interpretations, they'll just hammer away at their one reason that to them won the day already. It's what in Class 7 I called insistent replay. If you don't agree with their argument, they'll start it over from the beginning because there's no way you could have heard them and not come to the conclusion that they're right. Here's another possible tell. Trump bots turn debates into infallibility death matches to prove that they're right and you're wrong about everything. They identify with their arguments as though their whole worth depends on them proving right. There's no light between them and their weaponized spin. This means they're never curious, never willing to explore. They'll interrogate you, but that's not curiosity. They're just mining you for fuel to use against you and hoping that by hollowing you out, you'll be forced to cave. For example, Tucker Carlson always wears that look of bewilderment, but it's never curiosity. It's theatrical disbelief that anyone could be so foolish as to disagree with him about anything. That imperious sneer is what frame dominance wins the Trump bot, the high horse authority to rule any discouraging word to be out of order, inadmissible evidence. With Trump bots, you never get the sense that you're sitting together facing out into reality, speculating about what's going on. It's always adversarial. A winner takes all, loser loses all, math for absolute authority. With Trump bots, you get a shell game I described in the last class as warring, proving them holy, holiness girding their loins for war. In other words, indignation fueling their self-righteousness, which in turn fuels their indignation. Here, I'll expand on that. Trump bots shift between arrogance and humility, pride and brat, holy and warrior, all knowing and not needing to know. Such slipperiness can give you the impression that they're inconsistent, when really, they're consistent in their inconsistency. It's how they can fire hottest on all cylinders, just not all at once. To explain how that works, let's return to how we imagine God. Though theologians will say that man was created in God's image, philosophers and psychologists have long suspected that God is created in man's image. I'd go a step further in two directions, both back in natural history and forward to Trump bots. God is what any organism would want to be, and he's created in a Trump bot's image. God is an idealization of the three traits all organisms must have in order to struggle for their own existence. All organisms make functional, responsive effort. Functional means useful, beneficial, good as opposed to bad. Responsive means with respect to one's circumstances, being adapted or fitted to one's real situation. An effort is work on one's own behalf. Now consider God's three big traits. He's imagined as omnificent, eternally and absolutely good, never bad. He's imagined as omniscient, all-knowing, eternally and absolutely responsive or fitted to his circumstances. And he's imagined as omnipotent, all-powerful, capable of any possible effort. As such, God is exactly what you'd expect the anxious human species to imagine. He's the dream of ultimate satisfaction of our fundamental living requirements. And he's exactly what Trump bots would pretend to be. When they play God, they're posing as omnificent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Now, theologians struggle with the potential paradoxes of their idealized God. For example, can God create a mountain so big he can't move it? Can he create a puzzle so hard he can't solve it? God is also imagined as having a fourth trait. He's omnipresent, which can mean existing eternally everywhere and every when, but it can also mean that he's of one mind. He has perfect, absolute integrity, no inconsistencies at all. He can't trick himself because he's always of one mind, never of two. The left hand of God always knows what the right hand of God is doing and vice versa. God never speaks out both sides of his mouth. A big conundrum about God was articulated by Augustine. If he's omnipotent, all good, omnipotent, almighty, and omniscient, all-knowing or all correct, what's the deal with evil? Augustine reasoned that for evil to exist, God could have any two of these three traits, but not all three. For example, God could be righteous and correct, but not mighty. That is, he doesn't want evil, and he knows how to prevent it, but doesn't have the power to do so. Or he could be righteous and mighty, but not right. That is, he wants to prevent evil and has the power to do so, but doesn't know how. Or he could be right and mighty, but not righteous. That is, he knows how to stop evil and could, but doesn't want to. But what if he only gives the impression of being omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipotent by means of a shell game? He presents each quality, but never all at once. I mention this because Trump bots playing God to do just that. They maintain the false impression of being eternally righteous, right, and mighty by means of a shell game. Psychiatrists have coined the term Dark Triad personality for people who exhibit three traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissism corresponds to omniscience, regarding oneself as eternally morally good, like a saint. Machiavellianism corresponds to omniscience, being as cunning and clever as one wants, always knowing how to read people and circumstances, perhaps like an evil genius. Psychopathy corresponds to omnipotence, power unconstrained by conscience. Now imagine a shell game in which these three traits are revealed one at a time, each trait implying the others. Call it the ahole trinity, whereby a Trump bot runs a shell game with those three Dark Triad traits. We can distill the ahole trinity to this: since I'm a saint, I should win. Since I should win, I should sin. And I'm a saint since I win. Let's look at one example of this circular reasoning, though there are other ways to make them circular since it's a shell game. First, since I'm a saint, I deserve to win. Because I'm the most virtuous being, it's my moral duty to overpower everyone heartlessly. That's narcissism justifying psychopathy, or omniscience justifying omnipotence. We're fine with God being all-powerful because he's all good. A Trump bot plays God that way. For example, Hitler's narcissism justifying his psychopathy. He should dominate everyone since he's the sole force for good in this world. Second, since I should win, I should sin. Since it's my duty to overpower everyone, I deserve to be as shrewd, cunning, and manipulative as possible. That's psychopathy justifying Machiavellianism. In other words, omnipotence justifying omniscience. For example, we're fine with God knowing everything that everyone is thinking. It's the only way he can hold sway over everything. Playing God, a Trump bot feels justified in spying on and outwitting all enemies. The all-good should be all-powerful, and the all-powerful shouldn't have to play by the rules. Third, I'm a saint since I win. With my shrewd cunning and conning, I can claim victory in all competitions. That's Machiavellianism justifying narcissism, or omniscience justifying omniscience. Every time God prevails, we celebrate his virtue. Playing God, a Trump bot can claim that since it's a just world, when they're winning, their winning proves that they're the most virtuous. Might proves right, so long as they're winning, and when they're losing, might proves martyr, which is another kind of winning. Let's simplify the shell game to two shells. Collapse right and righteousness into one quality, being the best decider, being correct and good, accurate and virtuous. Call that being right, and you can collapse the ahole trinity down to might proves right, proves might, proves right. Because I'm right, I deserve might. Having might proves I'm right. Am I good? Well, I won, right? Doesn't that prove I'm good? And because I'm good, I deserve to be ruthless. That's only a little more elaborate than because I said so. A hermeneutic is a method of interpretation. And we talk of things being hermetically sealed, meaning sealed airtight. This ahole trinity is thus a way of giving oneself the impression of having a hermetic hermeneutic, an airtight absolute interpretation of reality. In other words, the impenetrable, incorrigible last word for all eternity. It's not just having the last word, but being the last word, the one who can never die, who will be here to turn the lights out when it's all over. If you hear an inconsistency, that's a problem with your ears. I have integrity, they'll announce, and you must believe them because after all, they have integrity. That's like claiming that the Bible is the consistent true word of God because it says so right there in the Bible, and it's the consistent true word of God. I suspect that what really holds the Trumpbot shell game together is the pretense of omnipresence, as I've interpreted it here. Though it might be more accurate to call it omni-integrity, the pretense of having eternal perfect integrity. In other words, no internal turbulence, and therefore no doubt or self-doubt, no potential for cognitive dissonance. When Trumpbots preen like they're logical geniuses who have calculated the one true way, that's what they're strutting. It's, I'm the most critical thinker, not just because that's what the cool kids are wearing, but because that's God's linchpin trait. It's how God could counter Augustine with, trust me, there's no shell game. The Lord works in mysterious ways that you benighted humans can't understand. Have faith in my plan. It's perfect because I have perfect integrity. Doubt yourself, but don't doubt me. To play shell gaming gods, as Trumpbots do, they toggle on each of the four godlike attributes. So far, we've talked about toggling on omnificence, virtue and vice, pope and punk, no deed too dirty for a saint like me. But we can apply the same logic to the other three godly traits. Omniscience toggling is saying, I know everything and I don't need to know about anything that matters to my rivals since they're all losers and fools. Omnipotence toggling is saying, I'm all-powerful, but I'm the oppressed martyr picked on for no reason. Omnipresence or omni-integrity toggling would be saying, I absolutely never contradict myself, and so what if I do? That's my right. One more point about the Dark Triad and psychological diagnosis in general. For centuries, we treated mental illness as evidence of weak will or sin. People could choose to be good, but instead they indulge in shameful behavior. Gradually, attention turned to nurture as the source of mental disorders. For example, schizophrenia as resulting from bad parenting. In the past century, we have discovered that many psychological disorders are functions of luck of the draw, congenital, neurological, and chemical problems. For example, we assume that psychopaths are born that way. There's a lot to be said for appreciating how some people can't help but exhibit their mental disorders. In some cases, it's nature, not nurture. Still, we should not lose sight of the potential for willed psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. All three disorders have their advantages. If we can get away with it, playing God is easier and more effective than being human. Being a Trumpbot is like this, willed or motivated dark triad behavior, taking the path of least resistance by means of absolute insistence. Okay, those are some Trumpbot tells, none of them perfect, which is disappointing, but also in a way good news. You might remember the frame dominance move I called going uncertain. If you start acting like you're dealing with a Trumpbot, they'll tend to go uncertain. Hey now, don't jump to conclusions. How do you know for sure that I'm an a-hole? Maybe you're the a-hole, which you are. Here's one of the advantages of being a fallibilist. Doubts don't disorient us fallibilists. We're used to them. It's not news to us that we could be wrong. We've pre-grieved that possibility and come to terms with it. We've accepted ineliminable uncertainty. No one's going to shock us fallibilists with the breaking news that we could be in error, especially not someone who brays it with theatrical confidence as though they're the world's reigning champion of judicious skepticism. Thus, the fallibilist can reply, you're right, I could be wrong. It's just my well-educated bet, and I'm sticking with it. You, on the other hand, seem certain that you're not an a-hole, like all a-holes. To admit as a fallibilist that you don't know anything for sure may seem like a disadvantage when you're up against an absolute Trumpbot. And it can be. They get to argue for what they want two-fisted. You only get to fight one-handed, since your other hand is holding the possibility that you're wrong. They get to reach up with one hand for any absolute high-horse rhetoric that justifies reaching down with the other to grab what they want. You don't allow yourself that high horse. But it's a mistake to assume that fallibilism has to be mealy-mouthed and riddled by self-doubt. It's a mistake to think you can't have high confidence in a bet you've placed. One can be a fierce, irreverent, even brutal fallibilist, and you'll have to be to do battle with Trump bots. Fierce fallibilism is what we'll explore in our next session as we finally round the bend from spotting to stopping Trump bots. Thanks for listening.